Hi everyone, welcome to my channel or welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Victoria. You can call me Vic. And today I am going to be going over some tips for beginner witches. And when I was kind of getting this video idea in mind, my main thing that I really wanted to focus on was the things that I wish I had known or someone had told me when I was first starting out in my practice 5 years ago, because as many of us do, I really started from scratch. I had no pathway to follow, no mentor or teacher to tell me what to do. I was really just kind of fumbling in the dark with my witchcraft practice. And so I really wish I would have had a video like this just to tell me some of the do's and don'ts and just to have made my life a little bit easier. So diving right on into it, the first tip is you do not need to buy anything. And I say this because especially when I was first getting into witchcraft, and I think even more so now, especially if you're somebody that is very much on TikTok or Instagram and you're seeing a lot of the aesthetics of witchcraft, you might feel this push that you have to buy certain things or that your craft has to look a certain way in order for you to accurately or correctly practice witchcraft. But I will be the one to tell you that you really do not need to buy anything actually to be a witch or to practice witchcraft. I think that there is kind of this push towards you need to buy these things in order for your practice to be valid, and I don't think that is true at all. I say there's kind of two main categories that I think of in this. There are the physical things like crystals, tarot decks, athames, books, all of these things, but then there's also the more educational side of things where you maybe see a bunch of courses that are being marketed online for witches. That's kind of like if you are a beginner witch starting out, this is the course for you for only $300, or maybe you see a bunch of tarot readings, and there's kind of two different parts of this, so I'll cover them separately. When it comes to the physical part of witchcraft, the tools of the craft, if you will, it can seem very easy to just purchase the things that you need. You'll see spell examples in books or online, and you'll see herbs that you don't have, or tools you've never heard of that you don't have, or all of these different things that you're like, okay, like if I want to do this, then I need these specific tools. And although it is understandable, and I have been there before, I'm here to tell you that you don't actually need to buy anything. If you are in a financial situation that's a little bit rough right now, or maybe you just don't want to spend money until you know more about what's going on or you're more invested into your craft, then you don't have to. I would always say as a beginner, the best place to start when it comes to herbs and when it comes to spells in general is to start with what you have. What spices are in your cabinet, what plants live around you, what grows in your backyard. Look there first. Although it is nice to have tools that are aesthetically pleasing, they're not necessary, especially when you're first starting out. I really wish that I would have known that I didn't have to drop money on all these things so that I could have learned myself what tools will I actually use in my practice. Because when you start off, there are so many different aspects of the craft, so many different tools and divination methods, and there's just so much, and you really shouldn't spend money on all of them. You really shouldn't buy all of it at once and then just accumulate it in your craft. I really think that your craft is very personal to you and you kind of build it block by block. And I think if you spend all of this money up front to get all these different things you see online, later on you might be disappointed because there's just some things that maybe won't fit into your craft. For example, for me, I bought a ton of crystals when I was starting out. I loved crystals. I thought they were beautiful. I was so convinced I was going to be a crystal girl, and I'm just not. I would have thought that that's something that I would have really invested in was crystals. And although I love crystals, I think that they're aesthetically pleasing, I recognize their use, I just never really go to them whenever I need to do a working. So all of the crystals that I purchased when I was first starting out, they're really just for decoration now at this point. Of course, sometimes I might bring them in, but really my craft just doesn't rely on crystals all that much now. And if I had known that ahead of time, if someone had told me as a beginner that, hey, you might want to hold off because you don't know what you're actually going to use, I would have saved a lot of money. Now, with the other side of kind of the things you can buy in the witchcraft space, there is the more educational coursework, tarot reading realm of things. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't think there is anything wrong with paying for a course in witchcraft or paying to get your tarot cards read or, any kind of divination or reading. But I will emphasize that I think when you're a beginner witch, or at least when I was a beginner witch, there tends to be a lack of confidence. You don't necessarily trust yourself to be able to do these things yet. You don't trust yourself to be able to, divine a message from your spirits. You don't trust yourself to be able to do a spell and it work out. And a lot of times we don't even trust ourselves to teach ourselves witchcraft with the resources we have around us. And I find that to have been very true for me. For a long time, I just didn't trust myself. I would pay money for other people to read tarot cards and tell me my messages from my spirits, even as my spirits were telling me directly, hey, you don't need to do this, like you've got it. And again, if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine. But I think a lot of us currently, especially in this current economy and market, we don't have the extra funds to be able to do that as easily. And you don't have to. I think these courses and these readings, they can be great. And courses are a great structured way to learn. And again, if you have the money for it, fantastic. But there's so many free resources out there to learn the craft on your own. And also, there is no definitive source of this is what the craft is, this is how you practice it. There are some fundamental foundational things maybe, but a lot of it is just so personal, and a lot of it is also just trial and error of you kind of experimenting, and then whatever works. I think it can be a lot better, especially in the beginning, and if you are maybe kind of working through some of the confidence issues when it comes to your craft, to really just rely on yourself, because that's the only way you really can get to the point where you trust yourself, is by divining more, doing more spell work, seeing the results, trusting those messages. And although it can be nice to go to someone else for help with that, I think if you're kind of leaning on it as a crutch, it's really going to hold you back in the long run with your witchcraft practice. Number 2, and this one may or may not be controversial, but again, this is just all what I wish I would have known and what works for me in my practice. Connecting to and learning from the local plants around you is going to help you more in the long run and be more beneficial to your practice than just learning rote memorization of herbal correspondences from a book. Now, I know that this is potentially controversial because many of us, when we're starting out, and many of us also very advanced in our craft, we use herbal correspondence books when we're doing our spell work. So we can choose exactly which herbs we want to put into spell work so that we get the correspondences that come from them. Now, something that I have really learned and leaned heavy on in my practice is that using herbs in spell work works so much better when you have a personal relationship to those plants. It just does. Of course, it can still work even without a personal relationship, but I think the stronger your ties are with this plant, the more that you know those correspondences, the more intimately you have this tie to this herb, the better it will turn out in the long run. You'll just fundamentally understand how it works in magic better. And also, if you have a good relationship with that plant, I think that it can also work better for you in spell work versus you just kind of throwing it in without really knowing anything about it. And logically, it kind of makes sense. If you see a plant in a spell book that you've never seen before, you've never heard before, it's the first time that you are witnessing this plant is in this herbal correspondence book, it's not even from your continent, then yeah, you're probably not going to have too good of a relationship. But if you were to go into your backyard and you were to look at your mother's rose bush, for example, that she's had your entire life, and start working on forming a relationship with rose through working with this live rose bush plant, you're going to have more of an intimate connection, more of an intimate relationship, and it will just be easier for you to really feel the energy of that plant, to be able to see its life cycle, to really feel its living energy and its dried energy as well. I'll also say this kind of goes hand in hand with the purchasing of herbs as well. When I was first starting out, I didn't have a lot of the herbs that I was seeing be used in spell work, like things like mugwort. I had never heard of that before. I didn't have it. Wasn't something you just found at your local grocery store, so I would have to go out of my way to buy it. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Each herb has its place for sure. But I think, again, especially as a beginner, if you're not wanting to invest too much money in it, or if you're looking for something that's a little bit more intimate and personalized to you and your local environment, which I always recommend trying to use the local spirits and plants around you, then I think just looking in your backyard, looking at the plants around you can be such a great place to start for herbal correspondences and incorporating them into your spells. Because really any plant is something that you can utilize in your spell work. And I think the more intimately you know the plants and you know the plant spirits, the better it's just going to be in the long run. All right, the third tip, and this one is so specific to me, but I feel like there has to be other people out there that went through this as well. And that is, the craft is not nearly as high stakes or scary as you think it is. And I say this because maybe it was my upbringing in Christianity or living in the South, but I was terrified to do almost anything when I was first starting my practice. When it came to spirit work, I was terrified of accidentally summoning a demon or an angry spirit. I was terrified of offending a spirit or a deity. I was afraid of getting cursed. When it came to spell work, I was afraid of messing up a spell and doing something wrong and accidentally killing someone or putting a curse on my family or ruining my life. And I was just pretty much terrified to move, to do anything in the craft. As much as I was interested in it and I was passionate about it and I wanted to learn, I wanted to do more, I just had this fear that held me back from experimenting because I just didn't want to mess up. I didn't want to be wrong. And I think this is really a natural feeling when we're going into something new. We want to do it right. We don't want to disrespect anyone or anything. We want to do what we're supposed to do. But the kind of funny thing when it comes to the craft, at least from my experience, is that a lot of it is trial and error. There is not a set textbook that tells you exactly how to practice witchcraft. There's not a set textbook that will say, you know, this is how your relationship with the deity should be. This is how your relationship with the spirit should be. There's nothing that definitively sets that. There are guidelines, and they are built up by the experience of several practitioners, hundreds of practitioners who have this shared gnosis. But there is not a definitive, this is how it should be. And that's really the appeal of the craft itself, is that it is so personal, and so much of it is an exploration, because your relationship with the deity or spirit will be so different than someone else's relationship with the deity or spirit, the same way that your relationships with people are different. And I think it can be scary going into it and it being so new, because we just want to do it right. We don't want to mess anything up. But that's really kind of how the craft is. You go in, you try things out. If it doesn't work, you try again. If you mess up, you apologize. It's just the way it is. It's kind of the same way that life is, honestly. And I think we have to learn to kind of relax ourselves and give ourselves the space to mess up, because ultimately that is how we learned. If you are going into your spell work with the best intentions, the utmost respect, you're very unlikely to have something catastrophic happen to you because of your actions. Now, if you're going out looking for dangerous spirits, you're trying to summon, you know, an entity that's known for hurting people, you're trying to do this spell work that is this generations long curse, then okay, yes, you might be getting yourself into some serious situations that as a beginner, you shouldn't really be getting into. And honestly, even as a more advanced practitioner, you would want to make sure you're really ready for. If you're in those situations, then your risk is much higher. But if you were just a beginner that is doing protection spells, doing prosperity spells, cleansing, trying to communicate with your ancestors, trying to communicate with a deity that is very well known, very well conversed with, you are more than likely going to be completely fine. It is extremely unlikely you are going to get smited by a deity from above from saying something on accident. I think ultimately we have to realize that spirits know we're human. They know we're human, they know we mess up, and especially in the eyes of deity, we are very, very human. We mess up all the time in their eyes, but they still like interacting with us, and ultimately if your intentions are good, you should be fine. And if you do mess something up, if you do, you know, offend a spirit or a deity, there are ways to fix that. You can give them offerings, you can apologize, and your relationship can move on. And when it comes to cursing or hexing, if you are not somebody that is really online, if you're not, you know, posting a bunch of witchy stuff online, you're not a political figure, you're not, you know, really in the eyes of the public, you're probably fine. And also, if you're not super involved in any kind of like witchy group where you're pissing people off intentionally, you're most likely not going to get hexed or cursed. Like, it's just extremely unlikely, and I don't know why that is such a expectation starting out. Maybe because that's what we see a lot of on like TikTok and Instagram, because it gets a lot of views and popularity, but that's just not something that really pops up unless you are in a space where that potential is there. If you're in a very dramatic witchy group, then yeah, maybe that could be a problem. But really, if you again are being respectful, you have the best intentions, and you're not in the public eye, it's very, very unlikely that that's going to happen. But if it does bother you, that is why protections exist. You can put protections up for that, even knowing in the back of your head it is extremely unlikely for it to happen. Go ahead and put the protections up. It's good practice for you. It can give you peace of mind. But I'll just say from my personal experience, very, very unlikely to happen. And if it was to happen, a hex is probably the one more likely to happen, which is a bit of an easier fix. A curse would be a crazy thing for somebody to put on you as a beginner witch. Like, you would have to really, really piss somebody off. It would just, the amount of energy and effort that a curse takes, like, you would have to wrong me in such a way, like, that's just very, very unlikely for you to do on accident, I will say. So take a breath, breathe, let yourself practice, let yourself make mistakes, and trust that it's not nearly as scary or high stakes as you think it is. I would also like to kind of remind people that a lot of the content we see online, a lot of the witchcraft content, including my videos, my posts, all of these, bigger creators, smaller creators, when they are posting their content, they're curating it very specifically to be seen. And a lot of times the content creators where that's their full-time job, that is literally their job. Of course, they're going to practice more often. They're going to post about their practice often because that's how they get paid. That's just part of their career. And so you can't hold yourself to the same expectations if you have a full-time job that's completely unrelated to witchcraft. You have 3 kids that you also have to take care of. We all have different resources. We all have different priorities. And I think we need to keep that in mind, that the content that we are seeing online is not a manual for how our practice should look. It can be inspiration and it can be aesthetically beautiful to look at. It can be fun to look at, but we shouldn't hold ourselves to that content as our standard for our personal practice. So just keep that in mind, that you can practice however often, however little as you want, because ultimately it is your life, your energy, and your practice. And this last tip is actually going to feel very contradictory to the previous statement, but it is called a practice because you practice. Now I say that because to my former self, who, little baby Victoria, who was getting into witchcraft for the first time in 2020, I was digging into the research. I was watching all the videos, reading all the books. I knew so much theory of witchcraft, but I was not practicing nearly as much as you would have thought I did based on the knowledge that I had. I think Ivy Corvus calls it an armchair occultist, but it's basically when you are a person that you are reading all this information about witchcraft, consuming all this content on it, you know so much, but you don't actually do spell work. You don't actually communicate with spirits. You know witchcraft in theory, but not in practice. And that was something I really struggled with in the beginning, was not practicing. It was so much easier for me to just consume content than for me to do it myself. And I do think there was accumulation of fear of failure, messing things up, not knowing what to do, not trusting myself. But ultimately, I do think that in this world that we are currently in, this world of content, it can be really easy to get the itch to do witchcraft, get the itch to practice, and then to watch content and that kind of scratch that itch instead, if that makes sense. So whenever you kind of feel the need to do witchcraft, or you get inspired to do witchcraft, but then you just go watch content and it kind of takes care of it for you, and then you never end up practicing, or you never allow yourself the space to practice. You read all of this stuff, but then when it comes time to actually do it, you're scared to do it. And so I just want to put this in here as a reminder, because again, I am nobody. I can't tell you how often you should practice. I can't even tell you to practice. It is ultimately up to you. But if you want to practice, you have to actually do the spell work. And I know that can be hard, because it was hard for me starting out to let myself do these things, to actually put the energy in and learn how to physically do it. But ultimately, if you don't practice, then you really just know witchcraft in theory. And I think a lot of us want to move past that. So just a reminder to actually do it. Let yourself make those mistakes. Let yourself try it out, because knowing it in theory is very different from knowing it in practice. Knowing the theoreticals of how to move energy and how to imbue intent is very different than knowing how to actually do it. And really the hands-on experience is where you learn the most. So keep that in mind. But with that, that is all the tips that I have for now for beginner witches. If you are a beginner witch, let me know if any of these tips are helpful for you, or if they apply to you in any way. And if you are a more experienced witch, feel free to drop your own tips in the comments below. We can really share the knowledge here. I think as a community, we can really help lift each other up, help with resources, and just making the craft seem a lot less intimidating, because I think for many people it can be quite intimidating in the beginning. So that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see more content like this, or more of me in general, feel free to subscribe to my channel and leave a like on this video. But that's all I have. I'll see you next time. Bye.